Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to day 78. Uh, let's jump straight into it. Let me bring up my Bible. Uh, Today's reading was Deuteronomy 24 to 27. And let's go. It was more of Moses expanding on the law, laws around marriage. Now, it's interesting to recall, and this is what I was referring to when I said like God's putting reins around the society, right? The laws and all the sort of um, stipulations that are given aren't necessarily the best reflection of what God wants, right? They're rather God putting reins around a society and customs that already exist and making them more, bringing them closer to what He wants. And we know that because Christ said, Moses, when Christ was expanding on this, he was like, yeah, Moses gave you guys a right to give a certificate of divorce, for instance, but that was more because of the hardness of your heart than it was God's God's a desire. Moses said, oh, if you sleep with another woman, it's adultery. Again, that's more God giving you guys a sort of a boundary. Okay, don't sleep with someone. But actually, if we're to really look at things as Christ said, even looking at a woman lustfully is adultery. And so that's more reflections. Like even the fact that you've looked with lust in your heart, even that is adultery. And we know God is perfect, right? So anything outside of perfection is not good enough, right? But God gradually and graciously sort of gives us the rain, gives us the he brings the rain, he reins us in, is the language I'm looking for. And so these rules, he starts off with and I say starts off, this has been continuous since maybe 4 or 5 chapters ago. But he carries on with, if a man marries a woman and then divorces her, if she goes away, gets remarried, comes back, or that marriage ends, the one that first divorced her can't just go back, right? He can't go back to her and he can't marry her anymore. So God's given certain rules. You don't just do whatever, basically. Um, and a newly married man must not be drafted into the army. Gracious, right? Don't let the man enjoy his wife for a year before he jumps into the army again. So we get like there's rules and regulations bringing society to a certain state, right? A certain level of the quality of life of these people, right, would be so great. And further to that, they would be such an example to those around them, right? um Again, rules around uh kidnapping and the consequences of that. um Lending, not taking advantage of the poor and the destitute. um Extending that to Israelites and foreigners. So it was interesting, right? An Israelite slave has to go free on the seventh year, um, and you can't charge them interest. You can to foreigners effectively, but some of the laws here are extended to foreigners. You shouldn't take advantage of them. That's one thing. They go on to when you are harvesting your crops. Um, Like, don't pick stuff that falls, don't pick stuff that's left in the field. Leave those for foreigners, leave those for the poor, for orphans, for widows. So again, it's like so much consideration is being given to the disenfranchised and the minorities in this society that it would make it so incredible. Already, the wealth disparity is to be very small, or it is controlled quite well, especially if they are living according to the law, as we saw when we did that. We had AI analyze it and compare it economically to others, and give what the economic climate would be. um So already wealth distribution is really well done. We've got the wealth being given to the various tribes. We've got the laws around them. Many times the rules that Moses expands on. One is don't steal land by moving boundary markers, right? So things are really well distributed. If one falls into debt, there are ways to get out of it. Indentured servitude. Um, There's also rules around this, like don't take a man's coats, don't take a man's millstone, don't take a man's means of making a living as collateral for a loan that you give them, right? And so, really, as a society governed by God, if they are to follow these laws, the quality of life will be incredible. Um, anyway, they carry on. Um, even animal cruelty, right? Do not muzzle an ox to keep it from eating as it treads out the grain, right? Even animal cruelty is considered, you know. Um, and Moses just carries on like this, with the rules, bringing these people into more alignment with what God would want of them. And then he goes on to, when they do enter the land, to bring a special offering to God. Again, establish that recognition. God has brought us out. God has now taken us in. And, when he gives us a fruitful harvest, we bring a part of that to come and then acknowledge him as well. And at the same time, that's having a double effect of feeding Levites, foreigners, orphans, widows. Um, and the Levites who have no other occupation, who have no other inheritance outside of what they do for the Lord, they're also taken care of. And we don't have the sort of wealth disparity we have in some mega churches, and I say mega churches, but your Joel Osteens and them. Not, yeah, I don't say that to be controversial. I say that because they specifically, I think Joel Osteen, that I've watched a interview he had, and specifically said it's so that the people can see, what God's blessings can do, which is cool, and I don't know where the source of his wealth comes from, but it's interesting that the Levites of Moses' time wouldn't have been so much more um, wealthy than the people. Um, so make of that what you will. Anyway, the Lord is calling them to. Moses then calls them to obey the Lord's commands, and they will be great, but they'll also be His people, His special treasure. Um, and He would set them above all other nations that He's made. So that's 26. Oh yes, I'm sorry, 27. Um, Yeah, talk about setting up an altar and the tribes. Um, was it? I think tribes Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Joseph, Benjamin stand on Mount Gerizim and proclaim a blessing over the people. And then Reuben, Gad, Asher, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, they proclaim a curse. Um, and the blessings are that they're cursed actually for things like people who dishonor their father and money, their father and mother, people who steal property, people who lead the blind person astray on the road. Again, it's an interesting specific um, thing to address. I wonder if this was a common occurrence, or if this can be extended to the general. Like, don't be cruel to the disabled. Don't deny justice to foreigners, to orphans, to widows. Um, Rules around sexual intercourse, curses on those that attack a neighbor in secret. Um, so these curses are almost on anyone that goes against the rules, goes against the laws and the commands that have been given. And that's where it ends. We haven't heard the blessing yet, but again, it's I find it so interesting how high the quality of life would be in if the people lived according to these laws, and how much Western culture or Western sort of civilization aspires to this. And how great would it be if we had followed? But there you go. That's today's reading. Tomorrow's reading is 28 to 29. So God willing, I will be here. We can talk about it. Peace out.